Well, greetings everyone, and welcome once again to another Saturday morning, right here with the Sports Crib Fantasy Show, along with the crew and Smash Up Sports. So I see the Hawk is already here and ready to go. Uh, my boy Reggie, he's in Barcelona, uh,
Ooh,
or maybe Madrid. I forget. He's over there for a wedding, and then he's doing let's see, Barcelona, Madrid, and Paris. Uh, so he will be back, I think, the week after, and we would wish him safe travels over there. He was already talking about the difference in times in watching the games because it's an 8 hour time difference. So, if the 5 o'clock game over here is what, 2 o'clock in the morning over there, something like that.
well, it's funny. Most weeks I'm often recording from Hawaii, where we live, and so it's sort of the same thing. It's wild to get used to that. Sunday morning, the first games start at 7 a.m. At least through early November. Interesting little fact about Hawaii, which is that they don't recognize daylight savings time. So right now, there's a 6 hour time difference between Hawaii and the East Coast, but and 3 hour versus the Pacific West Coast. But in November 2nd, it'll actually change to 2 hours and 5 hours, so you get a little bit closer.
Okay, all right. I didn't know that. I thought you guys stayed on a. I thought you guys changed like we did. Hmm.
No, listen, but not my decision. But their own culture, their own system, and they don't. They go their own way, so I respect that.
Yeah, no, hey, no problem. I mean, it is Hawaii, so you know. A lot of questions this week for you. Especially in the quarterback and tight end.
Yeah.
Uh, what's kind of what's your thoughts going into this week with the quarterback situation?
Yeah, it's interesting. Things are starting to shape up a bit, and so like from a fantasy perspective, a couple of guys that I think we had really high hopes for, like Pat Mahomes. Really thought with more weapons there, it would be, he may get back to where he was a couple of years ago, and even with the weapons, he wasn't starting that way, and now he's obviously lost Pacheco, lost Rice, lost Brown, and so we may just have to accept the fact that Mahomes is going to be a great NFL quarterback, but may not be the fantasy asset we expected.
Uh, quite a few of them are. Josh Allen is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apologies, 1 second here. Let me put my computer on the do not disturb focus. You're probably hearing a few dings of.
Yeah, I thought they were mine. I'm looking around like, where's that coming from?
I put on do not disturb, so it won't happen again. We're at that time of years we get closer to the election where you get 8,000 text messages asking for money a day. So apologies, I have those on mute now.
Don't no apologies necessary. I do a couple political podcasts, and believe me, I know exactly what you're talking about. So, yeah, doesn't
We'll
matter.
talk politics on one of those podcasts another day. But for today, you're talking about Josh Allen being a little disappointing himself.
Yes, I had Josh Allen in quite a few of my fantasy leagues, and uh, he's putting up less than 20 points a game in a lot of cases. At least with the scoring that I have, where you only get 6 points, with six points for a touchdown, and last year he was at this time he had 8 touchdowns at least. Yeah.
He was running a lot more. I do think there's been a little bit of game script. The Bills have had a couple of blowouts where they just sort of in different directions, right? They got blown out by the Ravens. They blew out the Jaguars, and both those kind of led to, they waved the white flag a bit early when they were losing to Baltimore. They just ran the ball and got a couple of defensive touchdowns against the Jaguars. I still think, I think a different situation. Mahomes, I think this is the Mahomes we're getting. We'll have a couple of spike games, but he will just do what it takes to win an NFL game. I think with Allen, he'll come around. I think right now there's a little bit of you know things are starting to normalize, but we are still 4 weeks in. There's a little bit of luck. There's a little bit of randomness there. I think as we go through the next few weeks, have a couple closer games, we'll start to see a little bit more of the Josh Allen we're used to.
And as I guess most of us fantasy people were talking about was the health of Anthony Richardson, and now we see Joe Flacco, my old nemesis, come out and beat our ass again. Excuse my French, but it's kind of frustrating to see Joe out there and doing what he does against us.
Yep.
But I mean, do you pick up Josh Allen? I mean, excuse me. Do you pick up Joe Flacco? Do you know how long? How long Anthony Richardson is going to be out? This 4 weeks he's out. I mean, is this going to be a trend? What do you do here?
I mean, you may not have a choice, right? If you need a quarterback, Flacco showed last year that he can still carry an offense. It's he may not be as obviously he was like a top quarterback last year with the Browns. That may not happen with Indy, but Indy again they have weapons. They have Michael Pittman, they have Josh Downs, like they have some good. They have Alec Pierce, like they have a few guys who can really catch the ball. So we'll see if Flacco still has the magic. We'll see if the league figured him out later in the year last year, but. If you had Anthony Richardson, if you don't have a great option on your bench, he's someone good to go to. However, also lost to that, you mentioned how Flacco kicked your butts again, which is true. But we're going to talk fantasy quarterbacks. What a week last week from Justin Fields.
Yeah. As far as fantasy, yes, he did. He did very well in fantasy. But now is Fields a quarterback that you want to pick up? Does he have that? Does he have that consistency that you would want to pick him up?
I would pick him up. I mean, again, realize it's an Arthur Smith offense. It's going to be a bit more conservative at times, but the last couple of weeks he's had a couple of big games. He obviously had the 131-point game. He's had a 15-point game. I think now that he's getting used to the offense, I feel like his floor. He's going to have some games where he gives you 14, 15 points, but that's a lot of quarterbacks. The thing he does give you is the ability to win you the week because of his legs, right? He can run the ball. He can get in the end zone. He can have those 31-point weeks. And at least so far, he hasn't pulled the Jay Cutler. I remember Jay Cutler back in the day was a quarterback who could get you 30 points sometimes, but he could also give you 4 points. He had those games to throw, 5 interceptions and garbage. And that has not been Fields, right? Fields' worst games this year have been like 11 points. And that was like the first game of the season, brand new offense, starting at the last second against a good defense. So, yeah, I feel like, look, if you have Josh Allen, great. Start Josh Allen over Justin Fields, right? But if you're in need of a quarterback, at this point, Fields is probably owned in your league. But if he's on somebody's bench, go trade for him. If it's SMASHUP, maybe go start him because he's a little bit cheaper. And if he's on your waiver wires for whatever reason, your league probably isn't very good. But by all means, go pick him up and try to win your league.
What about the rusty rifle? What are we going to do with it?
I can't fully trust him, and maybe I should. He's played well 2 weeks in a row. Not exactly powerhouse defenses, but he's given him some life. Are you a believer?
No. I mean, he's an ex-bungle. I mean, what am I? What?
True, but listen, I can forgive ex-USC quarterbacks, so I think at some point we've got to let that go, right? He's been on like 4 other teams since then.
Well, I'm kind of like if you're searching now, but I mean, some guys, if you had Anthony Richardson, you might want to, just saying. Do you think it's
interesting year in that regard, right? I think it's kind of interesting because 2 years ago you had a bunch of elite quarterbacks and the entire middle tier of fantasy got wiped out. Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Aaron just played poorly when he was playing. This is not last year with the Jets, but 2 years ago on the Packers. Trey Lance supposed to be great for the Niners and got injured. You had Stafford had a bad year. Dak got hurt. You had a year where you had to have an elite quarterback. Last year kind of got back to normal. Now this year's sort of odd in that there really aren't many quarterbacks who are playing elite, but it feels like there's a bunch of guys, even guys like Sam Darnold, who are playing really well. There's a bunch of guys kind of giving you like 18 to 22 points a game. It's a sort of a weird flat year for quarterback.
Yeah, glad you mentioned Sam Darnold. There's another guy, at the beginning of the year, everybody kind of, oh, Sam, but, number one, if you're a Minnesota fan, you're ecstatic, but I think it was, a lot of fantasy owners, including myself, was thinking, who was going to be the Minnesota quarterback. And then after he was named, it was still a little skeptical there. First game wasn't that spectacular as far as his numbers were concerned, but enough to win. And he seems to be doing just enough in the quarterback position for him to be formidable. But I still find him available on in a lot of leagues.
I don't know if he's available in your league. I would pick him up. I mean, if you don't have a better option, and I realize again it's fairly flat, so maybe you have a couple of the guys you like. Here's
the problem that I have. Okay, I have Patrick Mahomes and Brock Peters. I don't really want to pick up a Sam Darnold, but he's putting up better numbers than Patrick, and he's putting up better. So, I mean, if your team is 2-2, what are you doing for the rest of the season? The season is almost a third of the way through.
Yeah, it's so weird to think, and this is where in fantasy you can't be precious with any of your players. You've got to be ruthless sometimes. Like, it's weird to think about benching. I don't know if anyone's quite ready to cut Pat Mahomes, but think about benching him. I've already benched him in a couple leagues. I was wrong about him this year. I thought he was going to have that comeback year. I drafted him in several leagues. Unfortunately, and most of them got pretty good backups, including guys like Darnold and Fields and Jaden Daniels. And now, and basically every league, I've got Mahomes on my bench, and he's got a couple weeks to, and it happens, right? You see guys turn it around as the season goes on. Even last year, Mahomes started the year a little bit soft and then came on later. So I'm not putting him to the wire, but at this point, name doesn't mean anything. Production is the name, and winning is the name of the game.
Yeah, I have a couple of these where I've actually put him on the trading block.
Absolutely.
Just to see, rather than just bench him, I thought that was a much better move.
Can we talk about another quarterback who's been phenomenal though? Can we talk about Jordan Love?
Okay, yeah. Go. Well, Jordan Love, is he back on the field this week?
Yeah, he played last week and was great. He's only played 2 games, a small sample size, but he is the quarterback 1 right now by points per game. And man, I'm gonna have to almost look it up here because I'm blanking. So I've got Love. I don't, not to give it away so you can beat me, James. I've got Love starting in a bunch of my smash up leagues this week because I think the Packers have a juicy matchup. Oh yeah, they're playing the Rams. So this could be a huge week if you have Love, if you have Jaden Reed, even Dontavian Wicks, obviously Josh Jacobs, or if you're really, really hurting a tight end. I know we'll probably get to that a little bit, but even Taylor Kraft is a guy who, the Rams are giving up the most points to tight ends. I think the Rams in general the Packers in general make a strong play, and Love is picking up right where he left off.
Okay. What about Jaden Daniels? I mean, come on. When you're talking about rookies, I mean, hey, a lot of people, picked Jaden coming out, and I wasn't afraid to pick up Jaden in a couple of leagues. but it's phenomenal the numbers that he's putting up. Now he's putting up the numbers that we thought Patrick Mahomes would put up.
Yeah. Well, he's been great. And I think one of the things I think I may have mentioned before on the show, this is a point that Ming, our chef, brought up on our podcast of the week, was that if you have a quarterback who throws for 150 yards and rushes for 40 yards, it's the equivalent of having a quarterback that like throws for 350 yards. You just get so many points from the rushing that it just makes up for a lot of ills. And I think Daniels has the second most rushing yards of all quarterbacks behind Lamar Jackson. He's been a much better passer than I think at least I expect him to come in and be as a rookie. He hasn't had some of the struggles that like Caleb Williams has had. The only thing, and we said this with Richardson last year, and I'll flag a little bit for Daniels this year, he's gotten a little bit lucky, for lack of a better term, with the number of rushing touchdowns he has so far. We did a study on this. We looked at a lot of top quarterbacks, rushing quarterbacks, and other than guys like Hurts who like run in from the 1 yard line, of actual just running quarterbacks, they tend to get about one touchdown every 70 or so rushes. Last year with Richardson, we saw he was getting like one every 30. I said, okay, that's going to regress a bit, and it did at the beginning of this year. And I think with Daniels right now, he's got 4 touchdowns and 46 attempts. He's unlikely to keep up that pace. So he's probably going to come down a little bit from where he is. But if he keeps passing and improving as a passer, he's already one of the best quarterbacks so far this year. So if you have him on your fantasy team, start him with confidence.
You mentioned his name, Caleb Williams. Even in the Bears wins, he hasn't performed that well, even as a fantasy quarterback.
No, well, it's interesting because there's a little bit of the question with Bryce Young of as bad as he was it worse because of how CJ Stroud performed? And I always kind of said no. I mean, of course, like the Panthers wish they had drafted Stroud. I'm not saying it didn't. People don't talk about that at all. But I think Bryce Young was just so bad. He was just bad, right? It doesn't matter. CJ could have been terrible, and they still would have benched Bryce Young with how he was playing. I think in the case of Caleb Williams, like Daniels playing so well hurts him a bit. And people are kind of missing that he's improved his quarterback rating every week. It was up to 107 last week. You're right. As a fantasy quarterback, he's still not there. But you know what? Most rookie quarterbacks are not. It's actually the exception for guys like Stroud and Daniels. And Daniels is doing it partially because of his feet. If you take away Daniels' rushing yards, as a passer, he's been good, but he wouldn't be an elite fantasy quarterback through passing alone. So I just think that Caleb Williams looks like a normal rookie. And I think he's gotten better every week. When that'll help fantasy owners, it may not be till next season. But I think as a rookie, if I'm a Bears fan, I'm pretty happy with his progression.
What about ayahuasca?
All right, so I'm losing here. Which one's ayahuasca? That's like the drug you do in the desert, right?
Ayahuasca is Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, that makes sense. I think wasn't he doing it this offseason?
Right. Yeah.
With a break.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I gotta tell you, it's sort of funny. You'll recognize this as like a Steelers fan. There's got to be certain quarterbacks. Maybe you experienced a little bit with Tom Brady, where there's a long period of their career where they scare you. You could be up by 2 touchdowns as a Niners fan. We could be up by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and if Aaron Rodgers is the opposing quarterback, you're scared. You expect him to come down the field and beat you. And I've got to say, last year in Green Bay, where we beat them in the playoffs, watching the playoff game, I wasn't scared of him. And I think he's an upgrade over Zach Wilson, but I do think he's past his prime. I wouldn't want to be relying on him for fantasy. I think he'll have a few, good games, but I think, my real hope with Rodgers is that he's good enough that he can create value for Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson.
Joe Burrows.
Yeah, hey, listen, Burrow had a bad first week, but he's been good the last couple of weeks. I think, he's obviously coming off injuries, so makes sense it takes a week to shake off the rust. But I've got him in a couple leagues. I'm starting him, and I think he's a good quarterback. He's going to have a good year. As much as you probably hate to hear that.
Mr. Massage, of course, we're talking about.
So we were talking about him on our show yesterday because one of the players I love coming into this season was Amari Cooper.
Yes.
Name dropped an interesting fact that if Cooper dropped one touchdown, he had one called back by a penalty, and if he got those two touchdowns, he'd be the wide receiver 10 right now. But one of the weird things, so Cooper's averaging 9.3 targets a game, and we went through some of the advanced stats from Player Profiler, and I'm not gonna have all these memorized, but Cooper was like in the top 10 for routes run, air yards, expected fantasy points per game, route wins. So Cooper's still playing like an elite receiver. However, target accuracy to him, he was for the targets he's getting. This isn't strictly Watson to every receiver, but the throws to Cooper, he's wide receiver number 81. So he's the 81st receiver in the accuracy of his targets. So he's getting targets, he's getting open, he's running good routes, and he's winning. He's getting downfield, and then Watson is just missing him. Watson looks terrible this year, and Watson's young enough and was at least good enough last year with Cooper. I'm hoping it's something mental and he can shake it off. But what do you think?
Well, he's another one that's available on a lot of waiver wires that I find, and like you said, I think it's a matter of trust. Like you said, his accuracy and also his health. So I think that's why he's still available on a lot of waiver wires, and I think until we really see what Nick Chubb can do.
Yeah,
I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Watson, and unless the offensive coordinator changes up their scheme, uh, he's going to be a quarterback whose accuracy is questioned, especially the way that he's played when he was healthy. So I'm not sure. I'm not recommending picking him up, but if you're in desperate straits, I guess he is better than some of the other ones out there.
I mean, he's averaging 14.4 points per game via Fantasy Pros. Did a quick check here to the side. So he's a quarterback 20 right now. So yeah, you probably have a better starter. And to be honest, if I have a better starter and I'm just looking to take a roll of the dice, there's probably some other young guys, or Anthony Richardson, for example, is ranked lower. Trevor Lawrence is ranked lower, but I at least like the potential of those two. Now, whoever owns Richardson probably just has him on IR, but Lawrence is a guy who could be out there on your waivers as well. And I like the potential of Lawrence at this point a lot better than the potential of a guy like Watson. I think even if Watson recovers a bit, he's never run the ball. Lawrence runs more. So I just don't know his upside. It's a little bit like Will Levis. Some people are saying his praise in the offseason. I'm like, terrible line. You're relying on his arm. He doesn't run, and he's not a great thrower. So I just don't know where he gets enough points from.
No. But what about Geno Smith?
Hey, hats off to Geno. Listen, he's the guy I left for dead in New York. I just sort of thought, okay, this guy's a bit of a bum, and he's obviously been good the last couple of years with the Seahawks, and then now in this new Ryan Grubb offense. I mean, the entire Seahawks offense is rejuvenated, right? Ken Walker is a revelation this year. DK Metcalf looks good. Jackson Smith looks wonderful. The whole offense is clicking. And Geno, I mean, almost it's a guy like Sam Darnold. It's kind of a weird thing in the NFL, right? If we take a step back, there are so many quarterbacks that are drafted really high. We just kind of expect them to come in as rookies and be, CJ Stroud or Jaden McDaniels. But again, that's the exception to the rule and not the rule. I think as fans, we have such high expectations that we're quick to write guys off. But, there are a number of guys out there like Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, who they just took, 4 or 5 years to kind of figure things out. We saw that with Alex Smith and the 49ers. I think a lot of these players, not only is it harder for them to figure out the NFL and does it take a couple of years, but they come into these awful situations, right? Like if you're being drafted in the top 5, you are most likely going to a team that has a terrible offensive line, very little offensive talent. In fact, maybe you're at the bottom of the barrel because your general manager or your coaches are terrible. And so they just kind of get thrown into the fire. So it's really a cool story to see these guys thrive as they kind of adapt to the league.
Brock Peters.
I assume Brock Purdy?
Yes, excuse me, Brock Purdy. I'm sorry.
No. Look, Brock is fine. I think the one thing that Brock has to contend with is Shanahan loves to run. And I think especially with some of the injuries, he's happy to control the clock a bit more. And in the red zone, he loves to run the ball in, whether it's Jordan Mason, whether it's Juice, whether it's Deebo Samuels, right? Like they will get really creative and find ways to keep the ball on the ground. So Purdy's going to get his touchdowns. He's going to have a good season. But I do feel like compared to some other quarterbacks, the way that Shanahan thinks and likes to play, might cap his upside a bit. I think we actually saw the same thing a little bit even the last couple of years with Tua in Miami. It was just a guy who was throwing for a ton of yards. He's thrown to Tyreek. He's thrown to Waddle. He obviously got some deep touchdowns to Tyreek, but you get into the red zone, and McDaniel was really happy to run the ball with Mostert and HN, and even get creative and run the ball with Tyreek sometimes. So takes away what would be some touchdowns for other quarterbacks and more pass happy offenses.
Let's see if there's let's talk about the matchup this week, Cowboys and the Steelers. Dak.
Wait! I got to ask you what you think about the matchup first, because this is your team. You got to have those hometown juices flowing here.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I have a dilemma here because I have Dak in one of my leagues, and I also in another league I have Justin Fields. So. And I picked up Jefferson and I picked up Justin Fields because my other quarterback was Richardson. So anyway, in this matchup, I'm picking the Steelers defense. So I am taking Justin Fields in that league, and I'm picking Justin because of, just like you said, I think he's starting to get back in his groove, and he also has that 10-game clause with the Steelers, and I'm thinking that he wants that bonus, and he's playing like he's starting to play like he wants that bonus, and he's starting to I think he's starting to find his groove. He's starting to he has the confidence of his players and Mike. So I took Justin Fields. Now in the other matchup where I have Dak, I have Dak, and I believe in that matchup I have Dak and Brock, and I started Brock because of my defense. I think that we're going to get to Dak this week, and so therefore in the matchups that I do have those quarterbacks, I chose Justin Fields over Dak.
Well, the Cowboys have not been quite as fearsome as the last couple of years, and I feel like their defense has not been great. It was great.
Humphrey's out. Humphrey's out for we don't know how long, and Parsons is at least nicked. I think he has a high ankle sprain.
Yeah, Parsons is out of the game on Sunday, which is good for Justin Fields and his ability to run and not have Parsons chase him down. But even with Parsons, they weren't playing as well as last year. And then on offense, it feels like they've played with fire for the last couple of years. And I know they try to bring in an aging Brandon Cooks, but they really have not given. Since Ezekiel Elliott got a little bit too old, they really have not given him a second weapon other than CeeDee Lamb. And right now, their number 2 receiver is Jake Ferguson, who's a
The tight
perfectly
end.
tight end, but he's not great, right? And I feel like the Cowboys are starting to pay for it. Teams are zeroing in on CD, Tolbert, and some of the other guys. Dowdle. Like they have no run game. They don't have a second receiver, and I feel like defenses are starting to take advantage of that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's it seems, and you can give me your opinion on that, but it seems like as soon as Jerry decides to show you the money, then you decide to show the other side. I mean, when he was playing without a contract or playing for a contract, it seems like the Cowboys were much more in tune. But of course, I mean, we spoke about the injuries, the Humphreys
Yep.
and the Parsons, and that makes a big difference in their defensive scheme.
Well, listen, I'm not gonna lie. If my employer gave me a guaranteed, $250 million contract tomorrow, I'd probably show up 30 pounds overweight at the end of summer too. So I can't talk about any of these guys. I get it.
Well, hey, Deshaun Watson, what do
Well,
you
don't compare me to him. I'm not going on massage spa. I'll show up 30 pounds overweight, but I'm not going to court litigation here. All right.
Okay. Oh man, let's see. Any more quarterbacks did we miss any? Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence and maybe Kyler are two interesting ones we haven't really hit on. But Lawrence, man, he's a frustrating one. I was an advocate for him last year, even when he was playing a little bit more muted at the beginning of the year. I wrote a whole article on how he was in line for some positive regression. He had gotten a bit. Someone who was watching the game, so I had him in a couple of leagues. There were a couple, Ridley dropped a couple of touchdowns. There were 2 or 3 pass interferences in the end zone, where then Etienne got like a 1-yard touchdown run. Lawrence had, is a running quarterback too, but he hadn't run any in the end zone yet. I said all these should change. And before he got hurt, they started to. He rattled off several like 23, 25, 27-point games in a row, or maybe had a 19-point game mixed in there. Started to look really good. Then he got hurt. This year, I thought, well, maybe look, a lot of hype on the Jags last year. Maybe it was 1 year too early. Maybe this is the year they bust out a bit. And obviously, they've had a little bad luck. Etienne's been pretty poor. Ingram has been hurt since week 1. He's a big weapon. But, man, they have just not looked the same. And I know they had a better week last week. But I think a couple things. They probably need a coaching change there. And then hopefully it's just a matter of getting Ingram back and, Lawrence continuing to develop rapport with the bright spot on the team, which is Brian Thomas Jr., who looks phenomenal. He's hyper athletic. Doesn't get quite the hype of Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., but if for whatever reason Brian Thomas Jr. is on your waiver wire, go grab him right now, because he's definitely a guy who could really bust out in the second half of the year. I think has future star written all over him.
Now you spoke of the world's tallest midget.
Oh, my boy Kyler, drafted by my A's. He come to baseball maybe, but yeah, I don't know quite what to make of him. I mean, he's a guy who's been up and down his whole career. Played well kind of his rookie sophomore year, then kind of regressed a little bit. There was reports out of camp there in Arizona that he was maybe, not putting in the work. There's some questions about his work ethic and, how he was picking up the playbook. Obviously got hurt, came back, played well at the end of last year. And then with Harrison, with McBride, there was with Zay Jones, who's still suspended. I think he's still suspended this week, but back next week. There was some hope he kind of come back strong and had the one, obviously week 2 had the phenomenal week, but otherwise he's been fairly muted. There's another guy that can run the ball and he can pass the ball. So he's a hold. If you want to put him on your bench and, bench him for a week, that makes sense. Like make him show you that he can do the consistency, but he has too much talent to cut at this point. What do you think of him?
Like you say, he's one of those guys that, if he's on your team, I think you have to run him out because evidently you drafted him very high.
Yeah.
So you have to run him out there, but inconsistency is his biggest problem. One week, he's throwing 2 or 3 touchdowns to Marvin Harrison. The next week, you can't. What was his accuracy rating last week?
It was poor. I would have to try to look it up here, but his numbers.
I'm sure it was, but let's talk about the surprise of the week. The banker. The banker throws 503. Was it 503 yards? Come on.
It's exactly how the NFL works, right? Right as everyone is writing off the Falcons, they come, Kyle Pitts is like, he's on benches. He's even getting cut in a couple of leagues. Drake, I'll be honest, I have him in one league and I had him benched this week. I had a couple of the good receiver options, and the 60 yards a week he was getting was just not getting it done for me. Wasn't going to cut him. He obviously has talent, but put him to the bench, and so he just put up 27 points on my bench, which is never fun. But yeah, I listen. I don't think it's going to be Cousins every week. I don't think this is the start of a massive run, but it's the NFL, and it just shows that these teams have talent, and he's capable of putting up these weeks. So certainly a guy you can have on your bench at least as a fill-in for bye weeks or injuries.
What about Baker? Did he take a step back?
No, I mean Baker. I think he's had a good season. If I double check, I think he's still one of the top guys for. He's number 4 for fantasy points per game. He also had a really good game on Thursday. He lost, but Baker. It's exciting to see. After he was written off, he kind of had a good year last year, but I think there were a lot of people who have been burned by him in the past and weren't ready to trust him. But now he's doing it a second year in a row, and again, it also shows the importance of the situation, because like with Sam Darnold in Minnesota, Tampa has a lot of weapons. They have 2 credible running backs in Rachaad White and Bucky Irving. They obviously have a great receiving core with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who's fantastic being back in the slot. And the Vikings, obviously, for Sam, they've got Jet. They have Addison. Even Naylor's been a good number 3. They've got Aaron Jones. They've got a good offensive line. So I'm not trying to take it away from Sam Darnold. He's been a revelation. He's not just a game manager, but he's playing really well. But it makes a big difference to have that line and those weapons instead of being. Look at Sam Darnold early in his career with the Jets, when their number 1 receiver was Jamison Crowder. No disrespect to Mr. Crowder, who was a fine number 2 or 3 receiver for a couple of teams, but definitely not a number 1. Or then Baker Mayfield with the Browns, who I feel like if a quarterback plays for the Browns, just have to give him a mulligan, right? Like, have the Browns ever really been good to a quarterback? Not in my lifetime. As a Steelers fan, I know you're going to agree, whether you agree or not. Any chance to fight for the Browns?
There's a reason why I call them the clowns. What is the situation with Miami? I have Tua, and even though he's on my IR, I'm really thinking about, maybe I should cut him. I don't know when he's going to be back. I know the situation with the concussions, but who's a good replacement? Now you're down to, maybe Trevor Lawrence or one of the lower tier quarterbacks, at this point in the season. So what do you do if you have two on,
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. Let's talk about the quarterback for fantasy. Maybe we just talk about Miami a bit, because there's a lot of other fantasy implications for their skill position.
Yeah.
We're in a situation where a lot of these guys will be picked up. So some of the guys we've been talking about, like Fields and Darnold, would have been great replacements, but at this point are probably owned. If they're on your wire, go get them if you had to. Otherwise, a couple guys to roll the dice on. Trevor Lawrence would still be one I would roll the dice on. Only saying that because at this point in the season, there's not going to be a lot of quarterbacks on waivers, right? So if you have better options, amazing, go for it. if you're looking at like the scraps of who's still on waivers, Lawrence is one who I think could turn things around still. There's the talent there. Ingram hopefully comes back, who's a good safety blanket for him. You could roll the dice on Caleb Williams. If there's another rookie, I don't trust Bo Nix, and I won't trust Bo Nix. But Caleb's a guy, again, who's improved his passer rating every week. As we've known from the start of the year, Chicago has some weapons. Their line sucks, and that's going to be really hard for him. But they do have Swift. They do have Rome. Keenan Allen is back now. They do have DJ Moore. Even Cole Kmet is not a bad tight end. So if Caleb continues to acclimate, it could take him another couple of weeks. But he's a guy who I don't know if I'd want to trust him for the full year, but he might be good enough to buy you some time while you try to make a trade or figure something else out. Last but not least, a couple other thoughts, or maybe a guy like Herbert or Stafford. I'm a little worried with Herbert.
Both of them are on. I was just looking at the availability of the quarterbacks in our sports crib league, and it's Aaron Rodgers, Justin Herbert, Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence, and Matthew Stafford. I could see someone picking up either Rodgers, maybe Herbert. But Herbert is another one. In the last couple of years, he does good. It seems at the beginning of the season, and then he kind of in the middle. He's kind of It kind of depends on his schedule. I think the Chargers play up to their competition more than any other team that I know of.
When Harbaugh loves to run the ball, we saw this in San Francisco too, right? We never really. And now we didn't have a quarterback with the talent of Herbert. We had Alex Smith and then Colin Kaepernick, who both had their positives, but neither was the pure quarterback talent of Herbert, who's had a couple superstar seasons earlier in his career. But yeah, if you look at it, they're running the ball 18 times a game. 36 times a game, 18 with Dobbins, 18 with Gus Edwards, and a couple other with other running backs. So Harbaugh loves to control the clock, loves to control the pace. And so that's the scary thing with Herbert for me. Is I think he has.
Good.
What's that?
Yeah, no, I was saying, it seems that he's also lost some weapons. I don't trust the wide receiving core as much as I did when he had Williams and Allen.
You don't love Quentin Johnson and Ladd McConkey, Joshua Palmer?
McConkey is I do have him in a couple of leagues. I picked him up late and he was available, so I took a flyer on him. For his position and for the times I rolled him out there, I wasn't I didn't expect 20 points out of him or 15, so I was good. I think he gave me 7 points 1 week, and the next time I put him out, I think he gave me about 10. And that's about what you can expect out of a rookie. I wasn't, but let's talk about some of the tight ends. You mentioned Cade Otton. Let's start with him.
Listen, I'm not trusting Cade as far as I can throw him. I wouldn't want to have to start him in a week. He played fine this week. Saw in this weird kind of fun fantasy league I'm in where there's a PFS component. A few people had him in the roster. A couple people snuck him in on SMASHUP just as a cheaper option. But in a head-to-head league, I wouldn't want to rely on him for the rest of the season.
Mark Andrews. Production seems to be down a little bit.
So this is a trend. He was starting to lose production last year, even before the injury. And one of the things we've talked about on the Smash Pod is if you look at it, so Lamar is never a quarterback who's thrown like 50 times a game, like we've seen a couple times with guys like Jordan Love. Part of why Andrews was so good for a while is he was getting all the targets. So his snap share in 2021, his target share in 2021 was 30%. 2022, it was 29%. 2023, it was 22%. This year, I haven't checked the updated numbers after last week, but 2 weeks ago when we're talking about this, it was 9%. I think he only got one target last week, so probably even a little bit lower than 9. So the point is his target share has been trending in the wrong direction, and particularly given that Lamar will run the ball more, isn't the highest volume passer, as good of a quarterback as he is. I Andrews may get a little bit better than he is now, but anyone who's kind of thinking about his name or thinking about trading for him, hoping he goes back to what he did a couple of years ago, that's not a bet I'd want to make. What about you?
Oh no, for someone that didn't trust Baker Mayfield, I couldn't trust it. I mean, other than Evans and Godwin, who I have in various leagues, I didn't invest too much in Tampa Bay. I mean, Evans is going to get his. I think I could, if I could throw the ball 50 yards down the field, I could probably, get Evans, at least half the amount of touchdowns that Baker does, and I'm 3 times Baker's age, so.
As a wide receiver, is Mike Evans maybe one of the underrated receivers? If you look at the, poo-poo platter for the most part of quarterbacks that Tampa Bay has had, with the exception of the little 2-year period with the very aging Tom Brady. He's had Jameis Winston, he's had Baker Mayfield.
But he's been consistent. I don't care. I don't care. Like I said, I mean, I could play quarterback with Mike Evans as a wide receiver. I mean, throw it in his direction. You don't even have to throw it to him. Throw it in his direction. An
underrated player, right? I mean, I think people know he's a good receiver, but I don't think he gets talked about as the great that he is.
No.
If he's in his career with like a great quarterback in a different, if he had Peyton Manning as his quarterback, if he's in New England with Tom Brady for years, he's probably up there on like one of the all-time lists.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, he could have had Drew Brees for his quarterback. Just think what he could have done down in New Orleans. I mean, I don't see any quarterback that he doesn't match up with when you consider what he has done for the Bucs. So I was glad that he was underrated in a lot of leagues because I was able to pick him up late. Because a lot of people going for the name running backs or the big name wide receivers, and then here's Mike Evans sitting down here, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have to draft Baker Mayfield. The only thing I have to draft is just draft him, and like I said, Godwin I think was not a bad number 2. If you look up, I think what did he put up last week? 9 points as the number 2. So that to me that wasn't bad. I mean, if you had him and I'm thinking who else put up a big numbers. Well, if you had for chance him and Kirk Cousins, you're doing good. Going into Sunday. So let's see. Gesicki, yeah, as I was saying. What do you think about Gesicki?
Sorry, about which? I don't think I quite heard.
Mike Gesicki.
Oh, Gesicki. He's played well for the Bengals. Ironically, the thing that scares me a bit there is I don't know that Gesicki's even the best tight end on the. Do I call him the Bungles? Do I? I don't have to say it from a Niners fan, but I want to stay in your good graces. So
you can call them whatever you want. They'll always be the Bungles to me. It does, they're division rivals, so
But the Bengals, the Bungles, whatever you want to call them, they've got this rookie Eric Gall who's been pretty phenomenal. It's flown under the radar. Actually, if you are really hard up for a tight end and you're trying to think about later in the season, I've stashed Eric Gall in a couple of leagues already. I think he's got about 3 straight weeks now with 4 catches. He's played well, and he seems to be gaining more favor as the season goes on. Like Gesicki's a vet. He's been around a while. He's not done much. I think what you see with him is what you get. But I think all is coming up, and maybe not, right? Look, they're a team that wants to win now, so maybe Gesicki holds his role. But fantasy, sometimes you got to roll the dice. You got to stash guys. I think Eric All's a guy I'm stashing in a few leagues to see if he can kind of become that pass-catching tight end for the Bengals.
So who do you have starting in his place?
Smattering of guys. We've got Kincaid in a few leagues, which is
I was just going to ask you about Kincaid. He's another one.
He's slowly been getting better. I've got to say, I didn't pay a lot for him. I do more auction leagues. I got him for pretty cheap numbers. There was some thinking at the beginning there he might be like a wide receiver in a tight end position because there were no one else to throw to in Buffalo. I just don't know that he was ever that good. I think if you have the right expectations for him, he's starting to fulfill those. And with Shakir out this week, we'll have even a little bit more opportunity. I also have Laporta in a couple of leagues. Now, him I paid for dearly in one, probably a little too much. Obviously, got hurt last week. Finally started to come on, so hopefully the Lions' offense seemed like it took a couple of weeks to get off the ground, but now you see guys like Amon-Ra and Laporta starting to come into their own. And then Kelsey. Look, he was losing the underneath routes to Rashee Rice, and now Rice is hurt, and also Brown's hurt. But yeah, I mean, we talked about this when we're talking about Mahomes. The consequences, like by default, there's almost no one else for you. Got Xavier Worthy, and you've got Noah Gray. You've got Carson Steele. There's just not a lot of people from Mahomes to get the ball to. So Kelsey is going to be back as like the number one target there. Who are you starting at tight end?
Actually, I have Kelsey and Kettle are in most of my leagues as my starting tight ends.
Good one.
I like the way that, like you said, now Kelsey is probably the number one target. Interesting to see. Pacheco should be on the practice squad and getting ready to get back into shape. So Pacheco to me is going to be the key. How he comes back, if he comes back, the way that he was and performs the way that he has since the Super Bowl, then it's I think that opens up things even more for Kelsey. But it'll be him and it'll be Pacheco and Kelsey. I think will be his primary targets.
But it is a fantasy wasteland right now. Let me ask you this question. I don't mean to set you up. I would not get this right either. I'm looking at the numbers, but see if you can guess the top three fantasy tight ends by points per game, fantasy points per game. Just see if you can guess. And this is just what a wasteland it is. We'll probably not get. If you get all three of these right, I will bow down to your knowledge.
Look. I went for the safe plays. So I know Kelsey's. I know Kelsey's not there. I know Kittle's not there. I know Andrews isn't there.
Andrews.
So
Kittle is one actually. Kittle is number one right now with 9 points.
Is Kittle number one now?
Yeah, this is standard scoring. Let me see if I go to, I don't know, maybe half point PPR is the most common. So Kittle's number one. Dallas Goedert's number two, partially because the Eagles played a couple weeks without Brown and Devonta Smith. And then standard scoring, Taysom Hill was number three. If you go to half point PPR,
I was just going to ask you about Taysom Hill. Because we saw the Saints put up 91 points in the first two games, and now they seem to have cooled down. Is Taysom Hill still a viable starter?
Here's the thing with Taysom. I feel like we see this every season. He has a couple big games, right? I don't know if he's a guy I'd want to be starting week. I mean, look, again, tight end's such a wasteland. Maybe you do until other guys stabilize. But he gives you a couple big weeks every single season. Like he'll have a couple weeks, he puts up like 25, 30 points, and then he just goes back to giving you absolutely nothing. So I would be nervous starting him on a regular basis. But if you had him for a 26-point game, congratulations.
I can't think of his name right now. The young tight end for the Seahawks.
Oh, I know you're talking about not Font, but the other guy who just caught the touchdown. Barner, I think, is his name.
Yeah, I think this is only his second year, I think.
Yes, I think he's a rookie or second year.
I know he's one of them. Yeah, because Font has been there. Font is kind of the, I guess you want to say, the blocking tight end. He's lost a couple of steps. They realize that. But what do you think about this? The young tight end of the Seahawks.
Similar to Eric Gall, he's a guy you can stash, right? We'll see for whatever reason. The Seahawks. I mean, All is getting more targets, which is why I kind of listed him first. Barner only got one target last game, but he caught it for a touchdown. But again, he's young, like you said. Font is getting older, and I think one of those players, like what he is, right? Like he's just not startable. He's fine for the Seahawks. He blocks well, and that might be the thing that Barner has to prove he can do. We all of us, like we as fantasy players, we like the guys that can catch the ball. We like the athletes. We see the targets and the catches, but both with running backs and with tight ends in particular, NFL coaches see things like blocking a lot more than I think your average fantasy player does. So we'll see if he can dispel him. But if you've got a spot on your bench, I like the call, James. He's a guy who could bust out too.
What about Green Bay's young tight end, Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, I mean, a good option, especially against the Rams this week, a good streaming option. The Rams are giving up the most points to tight ends. And Green Bay is going to throw a ton. Love has been phenomenal. And of course, they're also missing both Watson and Dobbs. So right now there's Jacobs, of course, who could get a lot more carries, but right now there's going to be a ton of targets for Reed and Wicks. But Kraft could get his too. He's a guy who could certainly get a touchdown. He showed himself to be a good target.
What about Conklin for the Jets? I call them the not yets, but you can call them what you want.
The not yets, maybe the nevers. They've been not yets for a long time. But I think the last really good Jets team, they had those great defenses where Mark Sanchez just couldn't do anything. But it's been a while since they've had a really, really good team with a good quarterback and a good defense. But yeah, I mean, look, if you're desperate, Conklin's a guy you can start. If your tight end's on a bye week, why not? Tight end's a wasteland. He's a guy that can catch the ball. I just, again, don't really trust the Jets offense as a whole. I don't think Rodgers is what he was. Rodgers also a guy who's really never thrown to his tight end that much. Even they brought Jimmy Graham into Green Bay, just never really looked for him. So yeah, I'm just hoping Rodgers can make Wilson playable more so than Zach Wilson did. But I wouldn't want to rely on Conklin week to week.
What about the Texans tight end? We talked about C.J. Stroud. What about Dalton Schultz?
Sorry, man. They just have so many weapons there now. Again, if you're in a desperate place, need to spot start for a week, Schultz is a good gamble. The problem is I think that Schultz at this point is a better NFL tight end than a fantasy tight end. He gives the Texans what they need. He's a reliable pair of hands. He can catch the ball. He may have a game or two where defenses really try to target it on the receivers and they leave him open a bit more in the middle of the field. But not a guy you want to rely on week to week because there's so many targets and touches that are going to go to guys like Nico, Diggs, Tank, and even Mixon when he's back here.
Yeah. Fortunately for me, this weekend, my tight end was a Goddard. He's on a bye. So I picked up Dalton Schultz. in his stead.
And not a bad fill. And again, tight is such a wasteland that there's a lot of people holding two of them. So I can only imagine your waiver wire has to look really poor. So Schultz is good of a gamble as any, right?
Yeah, like I said, it depending on I took Schultz mainly because of the matchup against Buffalo. Buffalo to me gives up a lot of points to tight ends, so I did choose them for that particular reason. Well, let's see. Do you want to get to our picks now, or do you? Is there some more positions that you'd like to look at?
No, let's dive into the picks. Anxious to go through those, and then it's I'm actually visiting New York, so it's a beautiful day here. So gonna go walk around in the park and be a tourist for a bit.
Where are you?
New York.
Oh, okay. You're going down to Central Park, huh?
We go down to Central Park, and they've got tickets to go see Hadestown tonight, which won the Tony a couple of years ago, and should be good. I've actually, it's funny. It's for work. I was working last week. I got a different work in New York next week, so they put me up here for the weekend. So going to take advantage of some time in the Big Apple.
Oh man, hey, you going down by where are you staying? You going down by Madison Square Garden? Any of the good landmarks down there?
Well, staying in the Bowery. Actually, what I should check out, I should see if the Yankees play today. It might be fun to also get tickets to Yankee Stadium and
Oh yeah,
playoff game. Let me see
the Yankees are playing.
Royals.
Let's see, who are
Playing the Royals in game one.
They're playing the Royals. Okay.
Yeah, but the game doesn't start till 6:30, so unfortunately, it's going to conflict with my other tickets. I should have thought that through. Maybe I could have seen the musical tomorrow and seen the Yankees game tonight. But those tickets cost a pretty penny, so I'm not going to pitch them at this point.
Your tickets cost a pretty penny too.
Well, that's what I mean. Right? I already bought them, so I'm not going to the play for the game. But if I had to do over again, maybe I would have gotten the game tonight and then gone and seen like a matinee tomorrow. But let's get more picks.
How long are you in the Big Apple?
Through next weekend. So
oh man, okay.
So next week I'm gonna go. We'll definitely get tickets to see the Yankees next weekend, assuming they're still in it. And then I think we're also gonna go.
Oh, this that they're well. I don't think they're gonna get swept. So of course not.
Stranger things have happened. And the Major League. This is a crazy thing. Like the Major League Baseball playoffs are just more of a crapshoot than the NFL, even though it's only one game or go home, and certainly than the NBA, where there's probably has the most stability, where like the best team wins the series. It's best of 7. There's more consistency. You don't have the same variance. Talent tends to win out. So NBA, you normally see the best team win with some exceptions. MLB is just wild.
Hey man, look! I got the Dodgers. We got the Dodgers. I'm in San Diego. The Padres and the Dodgers. What more could I ask for? Come on, Tatis. Ohtani.
Are you going to a game?
Oh, most definitely. My neighbors have season tickets. So yeah, I'm going to a game.
Game 1 is in LA tonight, but what's it going to be? Game 3 is going to be in your neck of the wood. We used to live in San Diego, so we go to Petco Park all the time. It was my brother-in-law also lives down there, so him and his wife would bring their daughter, and sometime watching the game, sometime with her. Like they've got a little baseball field there for kids, and like the park.
The little field out there. It's really. They really stepped up and made it a family friendly ballpark. So yeah, it's not unusual to see whole families sitting out there in center field, with their kids, and it's a great spot. Occasional ball gets hit out there, a little kid gets a chance. It's a fun place to visit. I used to go. Part of my volunteer work was we worked at the concession stands at Petco Park. So yeah, but But yeah, hopefully, uh, this will be a great year. I wouldn't be mad if it was the Dodgers and the Yankees, but if one of those other teams came through, I wouldn't. Like you said, it's Major League Baseball. If we had a World Series here in San Diego, I wouldn't be mad at it. So
I like the Padres. I think it's a cool story. I'm certainly a fan of Soto, and obviously he went to the Yankees. So when that happened, I thought, well, maybe the Padres are going to have to rebuild a little bit. But to see, Machado have such a great season this year. Tatis obviously was hurt for a while. They survived that. A great acquisition of Araz, who's been a revelation at the start of the lineup. They've been a really fun team to watch. So
yeah.
I hope to find up there for a playoff game myself if they can. Might take us a couple of weeks. I need them to hang around long enough. But if they do get to like the NLCS, we'll probably out there. Hey, if you're at the park, maybe we can meet up for a beer.
Yeah. Yeah. You come, I'll be there.
Deal.
All right. So you made a really a good prediction there. Yeah, I think that's you in first place.
For our league,
is that you in first place there?
No, I think that's actually for last week. So first place overall is still you for the standings for the whole season.
Yeah,
you're up by 26. For last week, I got second place. The leader here, maybe if I go to the leaderboard, maybe I can share screen and show the people watching here. The leader was actually Reggie, even though I think he's overseas. I think.
Yeah, like I said, Reggie's in Barcelona, man.
Well, he said his lineup from Barcelona, and he got first place with 155 points. He started Jaden with the cannon arm, which went pretty well for him. But the big one here was David Montgomery. He played roll of the dice, which is a smash card, a player prop, basically where if a player plays less than 30 snaps, their points are doubled. And so Gibbs and Montgomery are in a timeshare. So Reggie made the gamble, and obviously, Montgomery had a good week to start anyway. Had 14 points that got doubled to 28, so that was huge for him. He had Derrick Henry, who had a big week, and he put starting running back on him, so he got a bonus. Godwin, who had a nice week. McLaurin. Bauer's a bit of a disappointment, but Jones was good. Actually, probably his biggest disappointment was your guys' defense. He went for that Pittsburgh D and only got him 1 point, but overall he put up 155. First place for the week, but he still got a little bit of work to do to catch us in the overall standings. And I'm about 20 points behind you, so I'm coming for you this week.
Well, I'll give you my lineup first for this week. And let's see. Okay, so I'm starting off. My quarterback this week is Brock Purdy. And again, it's a matchup thing. I like Brock Purdy. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to put this on the air, and I might be ashamed later. but I actually thought about starting Joe Flacco this week.
Oh, I would, as a Steelers fan, that's got to burn you a little bit on the inside, though.
Oh yeah. But he's not playing us, so I'm just looking at the matchup here, and I thought it was a favorable matchup considering, but I didn't have a quarterback that I thought that I was going to trade or give away in order to pick him up. So it was just a passing thought. But I did take Brock Purdy. And for my running backs, I actually took Derrick Henry and Jordan Mason.
Okay, that's a good 1-2 punch. I mean, Henry, I think I've got him starting in a bunch. Listeners are still seeing my my screen. We can compare your lineup to mine. So you start with Purdy. I start with a bit of a Packers stack here. So I've got Jordan Love.
Okay.
This is one of you. I don't have Henry, but I like the Henry pick. Henry is, I think, the top projected running back here, 15 points a game, but it's expensive. You invested a lot of money to get Henry.
Yes, I did. But then on the other hand, I didn't. There were certain positions that I put a lot of money in, and there were certain positions that I didn't, which you'll see when I tell you who my wide receivers are. But I invested a lot in my running backs this week. Like I said, Derrick Henry and Jordan Mason. Who are your running backs?
I've got Josh Jacobs. Again, I think the Packers are going to have a fun week against the Rams. And then my boy K9, Kenneth Walker. I've been trumpeting him since the preseason. He's back. He's healthy. And, he had 12 carries last week and was phenomenal.
Was it 4 touchdowns or 3? I think he had 4.
3 touchdowns. I think
3. Okay.
But, it was on 12 carries and about 4 receptions. But, week 1 before he got hurt, he had 20 carries. So I think this week he gets closer to 20 again. So that's my running backs. Who do you have at receiver?
Now, this is where I got what do they say? Penny wise and pound foolish.
We'll see.
I took Xavier Worthy, and I took the other Xavier too, Xavier Leggett.
I had Daily Dynasty show on Instagram was talking up Leggett for this week. He's been starting to develop rapport with Dalton. It was an interesting pick. And Worthy, of course, with no other receivers there, he only needs one good target. Right? He only needs to get like 4 or 5 targets, and if he catches one of those, he can get a 70-yard touchdown. So it's a good gamble.
So who are your wide receivers?
So I had, we're not talking flex yet. So my receiver spots, I got Jaden Reed. Got that stack. I think him and Love are going to okay. And the guy I mentioned earlier, right? Brian Thomas Jr. So I think that's one of the last spots I filled with my number 2 receiver. I need to go a little bit cheaper. So the guys who are a little bit like you with Xavier Worthy, I think actually they're close to the same price. So you took Worthy and I took Brian Thomas Jr. He's been getting rapport with Lawrence. I think not a guarantee, right? But for a cheaper guy, I think you could be in for a big week.
Okay. Who? Let's see. Wide receiver and flex. Who you got?
Tight end and flex.
Tight end and flex. I'm sorry.
My tight end, I got Kelsey. Like you got Worthy.
I got Kelsey too. Right? I also have Kelsey in my tight end spot.
I got. We'll get to the smash cards in a minute, but I put some of my smash cards you can see on Kelsey. And then I've got Michael Pittman Jr. in the flex. I didn't go Flacco, but Pittman seems to be better with Flacco than Richardson, as Flacco's more of a pocket passer and Richardson is not much of a pocket passer. So again, I'm not a little bit like I'd spent a pretty good amount of money on Love, Jacobs, Walker, Reed, and Kelsey. So also a little bit cheaper with Pittman there.
My tight end is Kelsey. My flex spot is DeAndre Swift. And this was definitely a money-making decision here. I was trying to make sure I had at least someone that I felt comfortable with, and I got him at. I mean, it wasn't an outrageous price, but he was one of the higher ones. So I did take DeAndre Swift and put him in my flex spot. But like you said, we'll talk about the cards later too. Of course, kicker, I took Evan McPherson, and I took Kansas City for my defense. The Kansas City defense, man, I was a little skeptical when they fell to me, and they've been quite a surprise. I mean, ever since they held who was that? They held 3 times inside the red zone.
Was it from a Baltimore or Cincy? I don't know which one they've
I think it was Baltimore.
Yeah.
I think it was Baltimore. But anyway, I felt that they were kind of a safe defense to pick, and and they've been consistent. With 7 points, 8 points, uh, not far off the 10. That your defense is given, and I thought of them as a steady defense. So, who do you have for your kickers in your defense?
So kicker, I got Will Reichard from the Vikings.
Okay.
I think they'll get yards. They'll put up some points. And again, this is a cheap one. He was one of the cheaper kickers that I trusted. Mostly with the kicker, I just want to, if I'm going cheap, I want to pick a kicker from a team that I don't think is going to get blown out, because that's one thing that removes the kicker. If a team's down 28-0, they're not. Well, maybe they get the 3 points just to not get shut out. But if it's like 28-7, they're passing. They're not going to settle for a field goal. And then defense, I went for Miami. They're playing New England. I actually feel like I did a lot of both of that. I'm in several leagues in the weekly tournament, so I've got some Miami, I've got some New England. Those are two bad offenses. So this week I've got Miami's defense.
Okay.
So where would you put your smash? So for people who don't know, hopefully you've been watching the show every week. The way SMASHUP works is you set your lineup, as you've probably already figured out, using a salary cap, which just like DFS, it allows you to pick different players, but this is all free to play. No entry fee, no pay to win. And then this is, in fact, the league play we're doing. So it's a free league like you play on Sleeper or Yahoo, just a bit of a different style. Then you also have these smash cards that are like player props. And you get to kind of put them on your team. And based on how your team performs, if you're right with the cards, if you play them wisely, you get extra points. As you saw with like roll the dice for Reggie last week on Montgomery. So James, which smash cards did you pick?
Okay. I took a ride or die card on Brock Purdy. I took the West Coast offense, which is kind of a different card that I found. It's not an individual card. And I thought that was a pretty good card. So I put up the West Coast offense. I also played a flex card on. What card was this I played on? What card did I put on? I thought I put a card on Jordan Mason. Where does it tell you what card you put on which player?
You should see, like if you're looking at my screen, you should see the card icons here. And if you click on the player, you'll see the names of the cards, like Anti-Hero and Human Voltron, Kelsey, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Let's see. I got a starting wide receiver card on Xavier Worthy.
So you have 1.5 times his score, which is good. That's just a straight multiplier.
Yeah. And let's see, who else do I have down here? Let me go back. And you also have a cap on the cards. It's like $12,000, I think it is.
Exactly. So it's not, if anyone's watching, you can't just go put 100 cards in your players, or you can't say, I want what I think are the 5 most powerful cards. You got to fit it in a salary cap. So some cards are better than others. Some cards are higher variance, so a little bit more risk. But they're all just based on your skill and knowledge of the game. These aren't about luck. These aren't getting random points. This is I think this player's going to catch a deep pass. I think this guy's going to get a lot of carries. I think this guy's going to score a lot of points. And so I'm going to leverage my cards, hopefully wisely, as our friend Reggie did last week.
Yeah, like that West Coast offense card, for instance. Now, you want to explain to the people how that one works? Because this is not an individual. Like you do have some cards like defense wins championships that consist of a team card. They're not individual cards.
So this is true. Like a lot of the cards are about, you put them on the player. Like you see on the far right of the screen here, end zone is lava. You can play in a wide receiver, running back, or tight end. And for that player, all points from rushing and receiving yards get a boost. compared to like touchdowns. The other ones he's talking about, he played 2 other lineup-based cards. You play this, it goes in your whole lineup. So ride or die. If you have a quarterback like Purdy, then all the other 49ers in your lineup get a boost of, basically of 25%. So you get an extra 25% of their points. So it's going to help if you stack players from a team like I did with the Packers, or like James did with Purdy and Mason. And then West Coast offense is one where the receivers get a boost. But it brings down your running backs a bit. So you got to be a little careful. You want to play in a week where you think you've got better receivers and tight ends, and maybe went a little bit cheaper on your running backs. But these are the ones that impact the whole lineup. So a bit of an extra challenge.
Yeah. Well, I picked the West Coast offense simply because of the wide receivers that I picked. If I had picked top tier wide receivers, then I wouldn't have played the card like you said. But I figured that I had with Swift, Henry, and Mason. I figured I have enough running backs that they can hold their own against the card.
Well, then I'll take you through my cards real quick before I head out to Central Park, which is one Cannon Arm. So on Jordan Love, I think he's going to throw for a lot. And with Cannon Arm, I don't know if you know this, James. Even if you're in this like icon view, if you're in the player card view, click on a card, you can see it gives you like the art and tells a little more about it. So if you're a quarterback, all passing yards and passing touchdowns get a multiplier. Now you lose some for their running yards and touchdowns, but Jordan Love doesn't run a lot, so I feel pretty good about this card. It's projected to get me an extra 8 points, but I think it can give me a lot more. If I come over here, I played a lot on Kelsey. Hopefully I don't regret this. Hopefully last week is for the real Kelsey, because I did 2 cards in him. I did Anti-Hero, obviously an allusion potentially to his the woman he's dating, but all points from touchdowns by tight end get multiplied by 3. I think he's got a good chance to snip the end zone. And I doubled down on touchdowns. So we have another card. This one's a bit more of a risk, called the Human Vulture, where all points from rushing and receiving touchdowns get ×2. But rushing receiving yards get cut in half. So, look, if Kelsey gets 100 yards and no touchdowns, I might regret playing this. But if he gets in the end zone once or twice, between those 2 cards, I might stack a lot of points. Then I with Michael Pittman, I played not so wide receiver. So if a player does not score a touchdown, you get 2 times their receiving and rushing yards. Both will just be receiving in this case for Pittman. If they get a touchdown, the card's just worth 0. So no risk, but I think Pittman's got a chance to rack up a lot of yards with Flacco, but has not been the biggest red zone threat in his career. And then last but not least, on the Miami Dolphins, I played sacks in the city. Dolphins have been one of the leaders in sacks the last couple of years. Patriots give up a lot of sacks, so this seems like a match made in heaven. But every sack by your defense gets a 4x multiplier. So, instead of getting a point for a sack, you get 4. So I think that there's a good chance the Dolphins rack up 5 or 6 sacks. This could be a nice little card for me, a nice little boost that could fit into my budget. So those are my plays for the week. When you come back and listen to us next week, we'll share the lineups and how we did, and hopefully I'll have overtaken James in the standings. But I don't know; he's got a formidable lineup, so maybe not.
Well, let's hope I increase my lead. So you have a great time there in Central Park, man. Why don't you tell our audience, give them a little more detail about what Smash Mouth Sports are, how they can get in, the whole 9 yards. This is your commercial before you get out.
Awesome. So SMASHUP Sports, we are a fantasy football platform, just like Yahoo or Sleeper. We're not a gambling site. Everything is free to play, no entry fees, no pay to win. We have 2 main games with the 3rd launching soon. Game number 1 is our free weekly tournament. So you pay nothing. You just enter lineups, and you can enter up to 3. And if you place, though, slightly different each week what the makeup is, but like this week, if you're one of the top 50 teams, you actually get you win cash. So no risk, you don't pay anything, but you can still win some money. Looks like we lost James. I'll keep going here for a second until he comes back, or he does.
No, I just profiled you. I just put you up
thank
here.
You. All right, I can see you. So this is number 1. So the free weekly tournament. Number 2, we have league play. So if you can start a league, and in our leagues, as you can see with James and I, You set a lineup each week. You pick your smash cards every week. And the standings are just cumulative points, which means, first of all, you're not screwed over. Look, we talk about all the injuries in the NFL. If you have injuries on our side, doesn't matter. You just pick a different team next week. Also means you can have as many teams as you want because you don't – Pat Mahomes can't just be owned by one team, or maybe a better player like Jordan Love. So, because I can pick him in my cap, you can play with 50 of your friends, 20 of your friends, right? It's not like a home league where head-to-head where if you start getting past 12 teams, there's nobody on the wire and injuries just devastate your season. And then last but not least, we have our single-player game coming out in a couple of weeks. We'll be making some more official announcements soon, but it looks like week 7 of the season. This is going to be super fun. If you've ever played Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Marvel vs. Capcom, it's going to be that style game where your goal is going to be to beat 6 different head coaches, many of them controlled by fantasy analysts and names you'll know from the fantasy world, analysts for places like Fantasy Pros and Upper Hand Fantasy, who are going to basically be setting the lineups, controlling these bosses. Each week, the bosses will get harder. So basically, you play boss 1. If you lose, you got to play boss 1 again. If you win, you play number 2. But 2 is going to be tougher. They're going to have some multipliers and different stats and stuff, some higher budgets. Now, every week you play, you're going to get a slightly higher smash card budget as well. So you're going to get a little stronger over the course of the season. But your goal is to beat all 6. Beat all 6 before the end of week 18, and you will make it to the completely free postseason Tournament of Champions in the NFL postseason. And in the Tournament of Champions, there'll be $10,000 in cash and prizes. Again, though, totally free, but you do have to qualify to get in. You can't pay your way in. You have to actually, beat these head coaches or place in the top 20 in one of the weekly tournaments. So
now, Chris, are those bots or are those actually lineups that were submitted by those?
Yeah, they're going to be lineups submitted by the experts. So in addition to just playing a fun game, you don't have to get a bunch of people. If you miss a week, it doesn't matter. So you can come back and play bots the next week. So in addition to just the fun of head-to-head and playing tougher, bosses and trying to beat kind of a bit of a hybrid of fantasy football and a video game, these are actually set by going to be lineups will be set by these real-life analysts. So if you are someone who follows and watches things like Fantasy Pros, we'll announce names very soon, but you're going to get the chance to play against some of these guys you get advice from. And if you beat them, you can go online and talk trash to them on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. So, but if you lose, mind you, they're going to be talking trash on their channels as well. So there's going to be a lot of trash talk back and forth. It should be a ton of fun.
All right, man. Well, hey, you enjoy your day in the Big Apple. I hope you have some fun there in New York. What's the temperature?
That is a good question. I need to check. I'm looking outside right now, and I see the leaves blowing. So it was really pleasant yesterday. I was just in a T-shirt and jeans, and so I'm hoping today to do similar. But I'm going to have to check the temperature, walk outside on my balcony and see how I feel.
It's been a while since I've been in the Big Apple. How's security?
It's good. I mean, so listen, to be clear, first of all, I feel very safe walking around here. Now, this is starting to be clear. I've lived in big cities my whole life. So the small city I've lived in is I grew up in Sacramento, but I lived in LA for 12 years. I lived in Chicago twice. I lived in San Francisco. Maybe the next small city I lived in for a while was San Diego. Actually, I guess now I'm in Hawaii, which is smaller. But I mean, I've grown up in the big city. I know how to act in the big city. I don't feel, obviously anything could happen, but I never feel
threatened.
I'm not walking down a dark alley in a bad neighborhood. I've got a little bit of street smarts. I know what to do and not to do, but I've never felt threatened or dangerous or anything walking down the middle of a big city and a well-known part of the city. It's just fun. It's just a vibe. I love New York. I love Chicago. Chicago, man, I don't want to make New York, LA jealous, but Chicago might be my favorite. It's the right mix of, the one thing about New York is you sit down for you get a sandwich for dinner. I got a sandwich for dinner last night. And it was $40. Whereas Chicago, you can still get a good meal and it's doesn't cost you your firstborn child. So
yeah, I hear you. All right, man. Hey, you have a good one. Are we going to see you next week, or are you on your way back?
Let me figure that out. I'll let you know. I would like to, but I think I'm by myself this week, and my spouse is here next weekend, so I'll have to see
Oh,
if
yeah,
I
yeah,
negotiate that. Like, hey, I'm
yeah.
gonna go in a hotel room and record a podcast instead of going around New York with you. May not fly, but
No, no.
let me see. Let me let you know. It may be that we do something in the morning, come back, we do the pod, and we go back out again. So let's email. Let's figure that out.
All right, all right. Well, hey, you have a good week and a good weekend, and as always, man, be safe out there and appreciate your time, man. You have a
Thank you,
good
James.
week.
Good luck to your Padres tonight. We'll be watching.
All right, man. Have a good one. See you
All right.
next week,
See you next
maybe.
time. We'll see you soon.
All right. Well, good day, and we hope that Chris enjoys himself while he's there in New York. And hey, make sure to set your fantasy lineups. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. If not, the week after. And Reggie should be back also. So have a good weekend, everyone. Good luck in your fantasy lineups.